All right. Thank you. We'll go to Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all for appearing today, and thank you for your submissions. And thank you also for bringing engineers, not just government public relations people, not being a slide on the ladder.
Thank you, Senator.
Senators come from varied backgrounds, but none of us, I believe, are equipped to deal with the very diverse range of issues and the complexity of issues. So sometimes we can be ignorant, so I just put that up front. Ignorant of this issue. We can also be snowed by answers to questions because of our lack of technical expertise. But one thing I've learned and really appreciate is that through that camera there are many, many people who are experts on the topic, and they don't hesitate to call me and say, you were fobbed off there. So we'll be back. You know, I thought this was just about regional issues like safety, regional access, safety, productivity and environment. I've learned it's much, much more. So, and I also acknowledge some of the examples that you've put out. You've got a very big challenge with Australian demographics, languages and technology, diverse technology. So, and I've got to disclose a conflict of interest. I have an iPhone from Apple. I use Telstra in home and business. I also use. I also want to make clear that that's got nothing to do with my questions. I'm happy with Telstra to some extent, to a large extent. But I just want to fulfil my responsibilities to constituents. That's all I'm after. So I want to get some nuts and bolts questions out of the way first. Now, you may have partially answered this first question. How many devices in use now are reliant on the 3G network to make or receive calls or emergency calls? And could you break it down into retail, wholesale and industrial applications? If you haven't got that at hand, I can understand we just take it on notice.
No, we do. Gerard can answer that for you now.
I've got the numbers. So based on handsets, the 4 categories, I can give you our consumer volume, our business number, our enterprise number, our belong service provider. That gives a total of Telstra. I can give you our wholesale for MVNO. And the total, which was as of Friday last week.
If you could give us that,
I can give you that. Would you like me to read it? And
also separate it into calls and emergency calls.
Okay, so this is the number of devices. So there's a key difference. So not all devices make calls all the time, but this is the what we have as records of devices that have connected to our network.
Okay.
So that's the numbers that we've got associated with that. I can read the table out. So if we want 3G only handsets, 26,000 for our consumer, 3,000 for business, 4,000 for enterprise.
How many for retail consumer?
26,000.
26,000, thank you.
So that's a total across Telstra of 33,000. Our MVNOs, or our wholesale providers, 6,000, which gives us the total of 40,000 3G only devices as of last week.
Thank you. What about Optus?
We do have the breakdown, but we don't have that in front of us, so if we can take that on notice. But we can reiterate the total numbers that I think we provided earlier.
Yeah, if you could provide the breakdown on those in TPG.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. So just to reiterate what we said before on the same category. So the total across all of TPG Telecom and our MVNOs for 3G only devices is 228. The number of 4G devices without voice over LTE capabilities, that number is just below 8,000. I'll provide all of this on notice so you've got the exact numbers.
Okay, thank you.
And then the number of devices that we suspect cannot make a 4G voice over LTE emergency call, that is about 30,100. I'm just trying to add up 3 columns on the fly here as well because we're trying to add your. So that's split between about 30,014 on TPG Telecom and another just over 100 on our MVNO partners. There is a cohort where we're still seeking to understand the device capability, and that is around the 16,500. We're still trying to determine whether those can make an emergency call on the 4G VoLTE system. So then I'll provide those numbers in a table to you. Those are all handset numbers, Senator. So on top of that, we've also got about 1,329 things like wearables, other devices that aren't a handset.
Thank you. I'll come to them. How many roaming devices are reliant on the 3G network to make or receive roaming calls or emergency calls?
So from a Telstra perspective, I don't have the number of roaming devices, but what I will talk through is what we have done and what we are doing from a network engineering perspective. Is it possible to get that number
of roaming devices, the number?
We can.
Thank you. If you could take it on notice if you haven't got it.
But from a network provisioning perspective, international roaming requires a relationship between our network and the international network provider. We have implemented a proxy arrangement such that a international roamer can come into our network, use our 4G network with a capable device, obviously, but still they have a 3G arrangement with our international roaming provider. So we've implemented a methodology that those international roaming customers will be able to use our network regardless of what the arrangement is with international roaming.
But they have to have a 4G device?
Do need to have a 4G device.
Okay.
We'd also like to take the question on notice in respect of number of roaming devices, but on the technical matter, I'll hand over to Michael.
Yeah, so I think similar to Telstra, we obviously have arrangements and partnerships with overseas carriers. We have, on our Optus network, we've obviously got a roaming service, including 4G. So similarly, customers that are coming into country do need a 4G device to obviously roam onto our network when the 3G network shuts down.
Thank you, Senator. Similarly, you have to take that on notice because obviously the number of travellers on roaming devices jumps around day to day. As has been said, those international partners may well have agreements with any number of us at this table, so devices may well jump around between networks while the traveller's here. So there may be some double counting the numbers you get back. I'll hand to Gary Chant in the Brisbane office just to make sure that there isn't any additional information to that answer.
No, I think we're in line with Telstra and Optus. The number will vary depending on the international travellers. So you'll get a snapshot in time, but it'll vary a lot.
Thank you. In the last 12 months, how many calls to 000 were placed over the 3G network and how many daily?
We'd have to take that question on notice.
We'd have to take that on notice.
Again, yes, we'll take that on notice, but I think it's important to put out the context for why a call can end up on a 3G bearer into 000. There are a range of networks that are available to a handset at the moment, and essentially in an emergency situation, it'll pick up the strongest of the signals and try and make a successful call on that bearer. So whilst we'll give you some numbers on how many calls have gone into 000 on 3G, it will overstate the size of the problem quite significantly because if, for whatever reason, the customer is in a strong 3G area and the phone without a 3G network would have quite happily made a 4G emergency call. So I'm trying to give you some context for why the answer you're going to get back may well look a particular way, not giving you a true sense of the
chose 3G because 3G signal was stronger.
That's
okay,
right.
Got it.
So, and there are also things like orders of networks in phones, so it may well be that it's ordered to try and pick up a 3G signal and make that call on that emergency system first. So there are a whole range of reasons around why calls may well come in to an emergency system via the 3G network beyond the issue that you're highlighting.
Okay, thank you. How many 4G and 5G devices in use currently rely on the 3G network to make calls as they lack 4G VoLTE? Is that how you pronounce it? VoLTE?
Yep.
VoLTE calling support with the networks.
Well, our number is 9,000, but it's coming down.
And our number was 25,611.
And mine, as stated before, is 7,978.
Thank you. What percentage and number of devices being used on each network support VoLTE roaming?
It's the same. It's the device capability. So if the device is 4G capable, it supports 4G roaming.
Same?
Yeah, that will be the same.
I'll just confirm with Mr. Chand there's no difference for us.
That's correct.
Thank you. How many industrial, Internet of Things or machine-to-machine devices use the 3G network for voice or data? You know, energy meters, emergency lift phones, vehicles?
So from a Telstra perspective, if we refer to 3G IoT devices, so water meters, electricity meters, today 3G capable, there's 399,000 across all of our customer base. If we look at smartwatches, so the very early versions that don't support the low band 4G, so it's our 700 megahertz, we've got 63,000, and wireless broadband or tablets, we've got 45,000.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of data devices, now data devices break down into a variety of categories. I'll give you the sort of the overall total and we can take the specific split on notice, but it's about 100,000. So these are predominantly in enterprise contexts. So it could range from
Small business.
Or large businesses as well, but it could range from, for example, from a data dongle or a data in a tablet or a data in a terminal, a payment terminal, through to IoT type devices in terms of monitoring, telemetry, etc. But we can provide that breakdown.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as our network's closed, obviously you'd imagine our numbers quite a lot smaller, and we've done all of the heavy lifting in terms of working directly with our medical device customers and IoT customers to make sure that that transition's already occurred. There are 1,329 devices, such as wearables, that are still on the network.
How many medical alarms, you've just given the answer, Mr Mitchell, how many medical alarms or fall detection or similar health devices or safety devices are in use using the 3G network?
We can't provide that breakdown specifically because we have no relationship with the customer. So our customer is a medical alert.
Chain.
It's outside that, but it'll be a subset of the numbers that I've already provided.
So maybe, yeah, so again, maybe just, if I could, Senator, just zooming back, we recognise that medical devices, as you've highlighted, are one of several categories of what we internally term high-risk devices. So I think lifts is another one that's been sort of quoted, as well as payment terminals, services in medical or community institutions itself. Similar to Telstra, we ourselves don't provide those in services, but our customers are the businesses that do. What we have provided those businesses with is specific identification and quantification of the number of known devices that are impacted, and where there is a high likelihood of there being a high-risk device, we work hand in hand with that business customer to track them down. So at the moment we have about 44, I'll need to double check, but I think it's about 44 business customers that are on that high risk register of ours that we're working with.
They may have hundreds or thousands each.
It varies, and I can provide the information on notice, but just for the benefit of this committee, just give us a sense of the size. We have a limited number, of which medical devices, I think there are less than 10 enterprise customers that we have relationships with where they provide devices of that sort, but we can provide more specific details on that to you, Senator.
Thank you. Will unlocked devices previously sold with telco-specific firmware branding, I understand, and that support VoLTE calling with the respective network work with all other Australian 4G VoLTE calling networks?
Yes.
So yours will work on all the others?
Yes. If it's VoLTE capable and you port your SIM card to another network.
So you've got to change the SIM card to do it?
Correct.
So if someone wants to make an emergency call?
VoLTE.
There are two scenarios, I guess, what you're saying.
Two scenarios.
Normal use you've got to change the SIM card so they won't work on other networks, and the emergency call, which will work on other networks.
Correct. So, yes, unless you change your SIM card, you can't make a standard voice call. You only make voice calls on your carrier, Telstra on Telstra, Optus on Optus, TPG on TPG. But for emergency calling, you don't even need a SIM card. The device will connect to an available network and make 000 calls.
Okay, I might come back to that, Mr. Tracy, later in regard to what you just answered. Optus?
Yeah, I think on this one, to the point when you've got a phone that's got a version of software that will allow the SIM card that's placed inside it to download the relevant operator configuration, you will be able to make VoLTE calls across the different networks. There are some early devices when VoLTE was first launched where certain software could be configured for the specific operator that it was ranged for.
That's a specific telco.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is the earlier devices. Where we are now, circa 2018, was largely when the Android base moved to a more standardised way of operating, that inserting the SIM card for Android phones, and the same for Apple, that the VoLTE configuration is downloaded to that handset and it can work on different networks.
So you don't have to change the phone, the phone changes itself?
Correct.
Updates itself?
That is the same situation for TPG Telecom and Vodafone. Gary, Chant, did you have anything further to add?
Yeah, just echoing what the colleague at Optus said, we have software bundles for different handsets and different carriers, but essentially the only real difference plays out when it's the much older handsets. So the newer handsets are consistent across the board.
Thank you. What are the new device sales numbers compared to... I've got another question in there, but I'll put it on notice. I'm being asked to make this my last question. What are the new device sales numbers compared to this time last year?
Senator, can I suggest for all of us that would be rather commercially sensitive? I'm happy for TPG Telecom to provide that to you.
Commercially sensitive there. We don't know who's bought them. We just want to know how many.
What my sales numbers are.
But what's sensitive about it?
You're a public company.
So
come on, don't.
I'm happy to provide that confidentially to the committee on notice.
Okay.
Well,
the committee will take.
Just before we do that, why don't we go to all of them? We're only, I presume, happy to take it on notice, give the detailed information, but we'll just ask Optus or Telstra, are you happy to provide that information?
I don't have the information in front of me, and we're happy to provide that information.
On notice?
On notice.
On notice.
On notice.
Okay. Look, Mr Mitchell, you might just need to come back to us. I know it's why it needs to be confidential. I don't understand that myself, but if you could take that on notice and come back to us.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll put the others on notice.
Okay. Thank you.